Hello everyone, my name is Ken Kruger, and I'd like to take a few moments to explain the concept of IAM Permission Boundaries in AWS. Now, the purpose of permission boundaries is to enable safe delegation of permission management to trusted users. Now, what does that mean? Basically, what it allows us to do is have a group of, say, security administrators safely delegate the day-to-day business of creating and updating and maintaining roles and policies in a way that retains the security group's control over exactly what's allowed in the account. Now, this is a fairly advanced feature in IAM, and it can be difficult to grasp it without understanding the problem that it was intended to solve. So what I'd first like to do is illustrate the issue that many organizations find themselves in as they adopt AWS. So here we have a typical medium to large size organization, and it's composed of many groups. We have a security team, a development team, network administrators, and we quite reasonably decide to put the security administrators in charge of all things related to IAM. Our other principals in these other groups aren't given permission to manage these resources, but very often we find that they have a need to have changes made to their roles and the policies. And so, for example, our developers may need to create Lambda functions, and each Lambda function requires a role and associated policies. Our network administrators may need to create some special EC2 instances with network monitoring software or some special proxy, and those EC2 instances will require a role to talk to CloudWatch or something. Our DBA group might need Lambdas or maybe Fargate containers to import and export things out of DynamoDB. All of this requires roles and policies. Now, what most organizations find themselves in is a pattern like this. These various teams will naturally send emails or some types of service requests to the security team. And this is where our problem starts. First of all, our teams over here on the left are waiting while the requests are being processed. And any waiting blocks our development process and retards our ability to achieve one of the main advantages of cloud computing in the first place, which is increased speed and agility. We're not supposed to wait. Secondly, our security team is now overwhelmed with a lot of low-level work. Basically, they've become order takers. They spend most of their time reading emails, trying to understand and approve and implement the request. Now, these administrators are highly intelligent people whom we hired and we pay a lot to do a different job. We want them to have their heads up. We want them to be looking at the different threats that our organization is facing so that we can adapt. But instead, they're heads down in their email systems. They're heads down in the IAM console processing orders. So as an analogy, it's as if we hired these people to be executive chefs, but they're functioning as short order cooks. So we don't want that. Now, an overworked manager in the security team might be tempted to do this. Maybe we should delegate some of the responsibility back to the actual teams doing the work. After all, they're spending a lot of time articulating what the policy needs to be. In some cases, the development teams will actually send the policy over saying, this is exactly what we need. And a lot of times these folks over on the left are just as intelligent as the security people. They know exactly what to need. They're internal people. We trust them. They're all part of the family. So why don't we trust them with the IAM utility work, basically. However, when we do this, we're violating a very important principle that's called the Zero Trust Security Principle. And this leads to exactly the type of threat that we hired the security team to address in the first place. Now, to demonstrate the problem, let's suppose our security team creates this role here called the average developer role. This is for our development team members to use. Now, the role is set up to have these policies on it to allow our developers to do their day-to-day activities. Now, it looks like our policy is just allowing basic S3 and CloudFormation usage and the ability to list things in IAM. Not a very powerful policy here. Probably not very realistic. In a real-world situation, we'd be allowed to use Lambdas and Elastic Beanstalk. You get the idea. Now, because our security team is getting tired of all of these requests, they've also made a mistake, and they've given us this policy right here. This allows us to have basically carte blanche access in IAM. We can do anything in IAM that we want to. And this is going to lead to some problems here. which I'm going to demonstrate right now. So what I can do is I can go ahead and switch a role. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in my account number, and I am going to select my average developer role, and I'm going to give a nickname to myself, which will make sense as I go on along here. I'm going to give myself Dr. Jekyll here, and I'm going to switch role. Now when I do this, you'll see that the screen changes, and at the top you can see I'm now identified as Dr. Jekyll, average developer. Okay. Now as an average developer, I'm not allowed to do things like take a look at the Kinesis video streams. So I happen to have this open, and if I just refresh my page here, you can see that I get access denied. My IAM policies don't allow me to do anything in Kinesis, let alone video streams. But here's where it gets a little bit tricky. What if I assume this role and I use it to create another role? I'll go here to roles and create a new role. I'll create the role in my own account, add some permissions, and the permission that I'm going to add is administrator access. Now this is way too powerful. This is much more powerful than my original policies attached to average developer role. Next I'll add some tags. I'll go ahead and review, and let me give this role a name. How about evil developer? It's going to allow me to do evil things. I'll go ahead and create this role, and now let's assume the role. I'll go ahead and switch role. Same account. I'll type in evil developer, and I'll say Mr. Hyde, and choose a color. Now what's happened, as Mr. Hyde, the evil developer, I'm able to do things that I ordinarily wouldn't be allowed to do. If I reload the screen here back in Kinesis video streams, you'll see that I no longer get the permission error. Now I don't have any video streams, but that's not the point. The point is now I'm allowed to view them. Now I'm allowed to see them, list them, change them. And I'm actually completely unrestricted in my account right now. So the problem is, by allowing the creation of roles and policies, the IAM administrators have unwittingly allowed a user, or a role in this case, to create a secondary role which exceeds the original permissions. Now this is bad. The administrators wanted to simply delegate some of their day-to-day work, but they didn't want those subsequent roles to be more powerful than the original ones. So how are we going to solve this problem? What we're trying to get is to safely delegate. We're trying to get it so the security administrators can safely delegate a lot of their day-to-day work to these development teams without allowing an elevation in the permissions that are actually created. So to summarize it, you could sum it up in a need with this user story. So as a security administrator, I want to allow other principals to manage IAM roles and policies without allowing them to exceed the permissions that I originally give them, so we can scale the permission management and work within the cloud faster. So the solution is what we call an IAM permission boundary. Now the simple tagline here is it limits the maximum permission that can be given to subsequently created principals. Okay, now it takes the form of an ordinary IAM policy which is attached to a principal which restricts what that principal can do. Now, given that definition, you're probably starting off by saying, what's the big deal? We've always been able to attach a policy to a principal to restrict what it can do. That's a simple deny rule. Now this is different because we can require that the permission boundary be part of any subsequently created principals. So in effect, we can force the boundary to be enforced on all of the various roles that are yet to be created. Now to explain this, let's start with our security administrators. They'll create a role with attached policies as always. Separately, what they'll do is they'll create this permission boundary. The permission boundary looks like a regular garden variety IAM managed policy because that's exactly what it is. It has an effect, an action, resources. We can use any constructs in an IAM policy that we ordinarily could. Now, this is the important thing, and this is the thing that you're probably not going to pick up just from reading the documentation. We're not attaching that permission boundary to the average developer role. What we are doing is this. This is much more subtle. We're attaching a policy to our average developer role, which in effect says you may create roles, but only if they include the permission boundary. So this means our role can then create other roles and attach whatever policies are needed, but the permission boundary needs to be attached to that subsequent role. So that will have the effect of further restricting what those resulting roles can do. It's not just another policy at this point, it's specifically a permission boundary policy. And because the permission boundary comes from the security team and our average developer role can't edit it, that team will ultimately limit what every created role can do. Now to demonstrate this, let's look at a revised average developer role. This has been created by the security team, not the trusted teams, and it's going to control what our developers will be able to do. Now the basic policies is unchanged. Our administrators still wish for our developers to do these basic activities here. The difference is this second policy here, the average developer bounded policy. Let's take a look at this. So first, a bit of a tangent. This first policy is requiring the resulting roles and policies to adhere to a naming convention and be tagged a certain way. Both need to include the team name responsible. So here we can see that we are allowing quite a few things in IAM, creating roles, creating policies, different policy versions. However, we're only allowed to do that if the name of the role or the policy includes dev team as the prefix. Probably a good idea if we have dozens of teams going off and creating policies and roles, it's probably a good idea to have a naming convention in place. And this is forcing us to have a tag called owner with a value of dev team. So this will make searching a lot easier later. Now the next policy here it is right there, this is basically allowing us to tag the role of dev team. I think the second one, or this next one here, is actually more important. What this is doing is denying us the ability to untag the owner tag. So we're not allowing you to get rid of this tag. Now the last item is the important one. This is the permission boundary restriction. This policy is denying the ability to create or update roles unless a permission boundary is attached to it. It's a bit like requiring the tag, but a lot more powerful. The permission boundary serves as a governor, which ultimately limits what the resulting role can do. So the role will be allowed to do whatever the attached policies say, subject to whatever this permission boundary allows. So remember, it's the intersection of permissions, and this basically gets the final say. And we're being very, very specific about which permission boundary to make. Now the last thing I'd like to show you is the permission boundary itself. So let me go over here to policies, and I'll search for this particular policy so you can see what it looks like. It's a very simple policy as policies go. Basically, it's allowing us to list things in IAM and basically do things in S3, and that's it. Okay, so create whatever roles with attached policies that you like, but ultimately it's going to limit you to this. So let's try to create that same situation that we had before. So I'm back in IAM. I've assumed the average developer role. I'm Dr. Jekyll here. I'm going to try to create a new role, just like I did before, the evil role. So I'll put in my account ID. Next, I'll add permissions. I'll go ahead and add administrator access. Ooh, very evil. Tags, I'll go ahead and bypass these tags. I'll go ahead and review, and I'll put in evil developer 2 because I think I still have the original one. I need to delete that. And I'll try to create the role. And look at this. I get a permission error. I'm not authorized to create role on this resource. Now, it doesn't say why, but the reason why is because I broke a few rules here. And so I have to go see what those rules are. Now, one of the rules that I broke was actually the name of the role. So I need to prefix it with dev team. So I'll put the prefix on there. I'll try to create the role. I still get a permission error. All right. What about the tags? So let me go back and add that owner tag. Owner, dev team. Try to create the role again. I still get the permission error. And specifically, it's telling me that there is an explicit deny going on. That gives me a little bit of a clue. And what it's specifically objecting to here is I did not include the permission boundary. So I'm going to use an IAM permission boundary, and I'm going to select it. There's my permission boundary policy. I'll add that, review, create the role, and I am able to create this evil role. Now you're thinking, wait a minute, you still have the administrator access on this thing, don't you? I do. However, the permission boundary is going to supersede what I can do with that administrator permission. So watch this. I'm going to go ahead and switch roles. To dev team evil developer 2. And I'll still go with Mr. Hyde here. And maybe in a different color, just for fun. I'll switch the role, and now I'm Mr. Hyde. Now, what happens if I try to go over here to Kinesis Streams again? I'll reload. And look at this. I get the permission error. Now, Mr. Hyde is that evil developer. Evil developer has administrative rights. They should be able to do everything. But the permission boundary says, no, you're not allowed to do everything. You're limited to what the permission boundary says. So the resulting permission that we see here is actually an intersection. The permission boundary defined by the administrator is limiting what the IAM permissions are defined by the folks on the developer team or the network team. And this allows us to have the safety that we're seeking. So to summarize this, the security team is now able to safely delegate the day-to-day management of activities on roles and policies without worrying that the privilege will be abused to create principles more powerful than we wish. Now, not everything about permission boundaries is great. We are allowed to have our IAM work be safely decentralized. That's the main benefit, and we're 100% enforced on our security, and our security team can address the larger issues, so that's definitely good. The cons are, I don't know about you guys, I find this a little bit awkward. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if you have to back up this video a few times to look at some of that demonstration again. And it can still be an obstacle. We can still have a case where the permission boundary itself is the problem, and so we still have to send an email to the security team saying the boundary itself needs to be relaxed because I'm trying to do some things that you guys didn't anticipate. But one of the big things that I found, especially when you saw me trying to create that role, is if we didn't match the policies, all we got was an authorization error, and that didn't really say what was the problem. You failed because you didn't add the tag, or you failed because the name doesn't match the convention, or you failed because you didn't add the permission boundary. So personally, I find that a little bit awkward. Now, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about this, maybe from a different author, take a look at this link that I have here from the original blog announcement. So I hope you found this to be a useful explanation of permission boundaries. My name's Ken. Thanks for watching.